going on, everybody? Welcome back to Guiding Back Samurai Jack in Review. My name is Kyle, your host. Welcome to Project Potter, guys. Welcome to episode 15, which is the second episode of season 2 of Samurai Jack. If you haven't seen the show before, guys, we're doing a quick recap. We're doing a favorite scene, a favorite character, a score out of 10, and some Easter eggs at the end if we have any of those. So yeah, same format, guys, and here we go. Okay, guys, so episode 15, which is the second episode, as I stated, of season 2. I was a big fan of the first episode. This one takes a different approach. So this one is called Jack Tales, and it is kind of these mini stories. So we get 3 mini stories in this one. The first one is Jack and the Worm, which we find out is really like 2 worms. And so Jack is like, oh, another tall tale of him going to find a magic place, and there's a worm that can grant any wish. And so he goes and he seeks this place out. Where he's getting all this info from, I don't know, but he's going around, he's hearing all these tales, and he's finding these wells and these worms, and everything is deceptive and nothing is what it seems. And so Jack shows up to this lake, and the worm comes up, and it looks kind of like it's like a red and black, so it's like a coup color, so it's deceptive. And he's like, oh, I heard you can grant any wish. And they're like, oh, yeah, maybe. And then another worm comes up. And then he's like, there's 2 of you. And he's like, the trick here is that you get one guess. He's like, one of us is the magic worm. He's like, one of us is not. So they're like, you have to guess which one. He's like, if you guess it right, then, we bring you to the magic land. He's like, if you guess it wrong, then you're going to be eaten and digested for 500 years. And so they look pretty much exactly the same. They're messing around. I think it's 2 British voice actors, and there's a bit of humor there where, they're trying to tell knock-knock jokes, and Jack's like, never heard a knock-knock joke, apparently. So they're like, knock-knock. And he's like, sitting there. And they're like, you're supposed to say, who's there? And he's like, oh, who's there? And they're like, banana. And then he's sitting there. And like, you're supposed to say banana who? And they're like, banana who? And they keep doing that, and it doesn't work. But basically, Jack eventually is like, all right, I'm going to take my guess. And he's like, my question for you, because they say he can ask one question. He's like, my question for you is that, what would your brother say is the answer? And so they ask each other, and they're like, oh, that's easy. It's me. And he's like, okay, well, if he says it's you, then I'm going to guess the other one. And they're like, well, how did you know? And he's like, well, if you were truthful and you were telling the truth, then it would be you. But if you were truthful and you were telling a lie, he says, like, if you're the truthful worm and you're telling the truth and it was you. And he's like, because you're the truthful worm, even if you were lying, I don't know. Honestly, it was clever. I didn't write it down. It made sense, but basically Jack gets eaten. And they're like, oh, well, the thing that he didn't know is that we were both liars. And so Jack is tricked, and, he's sitting there with a bunch of old people who's not quite digested yet. But they've been there for a while, obviously. And he's like, when does the magic happen? And I was like, oh, dude, this isn't what's this dumb Samurai Jack? This isn't Jack. This isn't the character I know. And then he's like, oh, there is no magic, is there? And the people are like, nah, dude. So we leave that tale where that is. So how did he get out? Did he just cut his way out? We don't know. This is part of the problem I have with this episode. So that's the first tale. Then we go to the second tale, which is Jack kind of in the forest like he always is. I will say season 2, I talked about this last week for the season 2 opener. They do a really good job with sound in season 2. So, and then the second tale is really evident. So Jack is sharpening his sword with like a rock, and it's like, it sounds really good. There's like a swiping animation where every time he swipes the sword, it's like swiping the frame, which is really cool. But Jack is like cautious. It's like dark in the forest at night. And then all of a sudden he like turns around, and there's like these purple, like glowing family people, but they look kind of like zombies, and their eyes are all weird, and Jack can tell something isn't right. But they're like, oh, we haven't eaten in so long. Please, can we join you? And he's like, okay, yeah, you can sit by the fire. And he's sharpening the sword. The baby goes over to like touch it. And he's like, whoa, don't touch that. He's like, you can get hurt from that. And then the baby punches him in the face and gets the sword, tries to eat it. And then it turns out these people are after Jack. And they're like licking their lips, and they want to just like eat something. And he goes, there's like an old grandma, but they're all like very fragile. They're like, just give us your food and we'll let you live. And he's like, food? He's like, you mean my sword? And he takes it out, and they're like, oh, and he's like moving around, and they're falling on the sword. So it's very clear they just want the sword. And Jack eventually like gets a piece of one of them, and then the girl's like mask falls, or her like face falls off, and it turns out that she's made of metal, which is going to be this lady over here. And it turns out they're like these weird cannibalistic metal eaters, because as soon as her face falls off, the three of them turn on her and they start eating her. And then like the guy gets crashed, and there's like his stomach is exposed and it's wires, and then like the kid goes after them. And so they literally start eating each other, and they cannibalize each other. And it's like really messed up. But I like that part because it was kind of like weird and different and mature. But yeah, what the point of that story was, no idea. Which again, I don't understand the point of this episode. But so the third story we have is Jack the Fairy and the Gargoyle, and Jack is climbing a tower because the the fairy can grant any wish, and so Jack is just continuing to like hit these tails up, and I think at this point he's just like, look, one of these has got to work. And so he goes over there, and there's a gargoyle, and there's a fairy trapped in like this little ball that's like electrified around, and she can't escape. And the gargoyle has the key on his like around him, and it's like this big red gargoyle. And Jack just goes into reach to free the fairy, and obviously it's not going to work. And again, I'm like, dude, Jack wouldn't just reach into this magic ball. Like, what is this stupid Jack that we're getting in this episode? It doesn't make any sense. But he reaches in there, and his hand is stuck, and she's like, oh no, now we're both stuck. She's like, you have to get the key from the gargoyle. And so he's sleeping, and Jack goes over there, and there's a scene where he like slowly lifts it up. And in like any movie, I think like Toy Story does this too, although Toy Story is great. So he goes to like lift it around his head, and then right before he's about done, the gargoyle kind of wakes up, and then there's a split moment of hesitation, and then he goes back to sleep. But he does take it off, and it's just like a little ball. And he's like banging it against the orb, and he's like, how does this work? And he bangs it enough times where it wakes up the gargoyle. And the gargoyle is like, nobody takes my fairy. And there's like a quick fight where he like, Jack is like smashed against the wall, and then the gargoyle fights him a couple times. Jack can only use one hand. But he's still got his sword, slices up the gargoyle. Gargoyle's no match. His arms kind of fall off, and they fall down. And he destroys, or he breaks, and so she's like, Jack, why did you do that? Like, now, like, you don't have the magic words. And he's like, what magic words? She's like the one that the gargoyle knew. And then he just turns to the fairy and he says, I wish we were free. And that's how the episode ends. Okay, guys, so for the magic sword, I guess it's got to be the worms at the beginning. I didn't really like any of these three stories, but at least the worms were the most entertaining, and they had a little bit of back and forth in the beginning. I thought the middle part with the metal eaters, even though it was cool visually, I don't understand what had to do with anything, like to do with the story. And then the third part, at least Jack was still looking for a wish, but yeah, the metal eaters had like nothing to do with it. I just picked them because they were the coolest part of the episode, I guess, but it didn't have any overall impact on the larger story. But yeah, the worms I thought were cool, and Jack being deceived and he can't trust anything now. But I guess by default I get my magic sword. For a Portal in Time, guys, it's got to be the metal eaters. It was really cool visually, and like to see them like literally eat each other. They go from being so hungry and trying to be normal around Jack, and then the faceplate falls off, and that was a cool moment where like she's like, why are you guys all looking at me? And then they start attacking her, and it's like they didn't know that she was metal, or maybe they just needed to cover it up. And we don't know if these are like four strangers or four robots that came together. I don't know, but that scene visually was the most interesting of the episode, so that's got to be my Portal in Time for this week. For a score, guys, I got to be honest, I kind of hated this episode. It was, I think, the least interesting one probably of the series so far. I'm going to give it a 6.2. I mean, I really didn't like it. It's like, I just don't understand why like they had to put 3 mini stories in here. Like, this one is called Jack's Tales, and when you think back to the season 1 finale of Aku's Fairy Tales, that was excellent because like Aku was trying to get the kids to like them. And then, I really enjoyed that finale. And then it's like they tried to flip it with Jack's Tales, but it's just like mini stories, but it's like they weren't good enough. This is almost like the throwaway stories that they had and they weren't good enough for their own episode, like we've seen with like the Scotsman and all that. So, but it's like giving less time to those characters made me be like, who are these random like metal eaters? I guess it speaks to like the world being crazy, but I don't know. I would have liked something that was more connecting. I don't know. Jack frees the fairy, and then it's like, did she grant his wish? I don't know. It just ends when he frees her. So it's like, it doesn't make any sense because it seems like he gets his wish, and then I don't know if he uses that for the next episode or whatever, but I don't know. I just didn't like it. I thought the sound was really good in parts, like with Jack sharpening his sword. That was really cool. But yeah, I don't know. That's about all I got to say about this one. All right, guys, we do have some Jack facts this week. So one of the worms at the beginning is voiced by renowned English actor Tim Curry. And Tim Curry, as we know, is Dr. Frankenfurter in the film The Rocky Horror Picture Show, 1975. So that was interesting. I'm not really familiar with his work, but that is one of our Jack facts for this week. And then the gargoyle was the voice of Jeff Bennett, and he also voiced the gargoyle character named Brooklyn in the Disney TV series Gargoyles. So this guy's real good at making gargoyle sounds or being a gargoyle. So good for him. But that is it for the Jack facts for this week. Okay, guys. Well, that's it. That's another episode. A disappointing episode for sure. But they're not all going to be winners. So we hit some highs and now we hit some lows. So I expect episode 3 to bounce back. But yeah, this is a low point, I think, of the series. So I didn't really care for any of the 3 stories. I really like when they spend more time building one story, like season 1 with the Rock Lava Man. That was awesome. I really enjoyed that. This was just 3 stories that I feel like they just threw together to put an episode together. I didn't really like any of them. So that's okay though. We move on, guys. We keep going, keep our journey going. We got to get back to the past. So thanks for checking out Project Potter, guys. Like, comment, subscribe. Ring that bell notification. You already know. I really do appreciate you guys' support. And until next time, guys, got to get back.